And we'll start right here with the Cardinals, right?
Yeah. Arizona Cardinals. What do you think? Sexy team? I don't know.
I think I wish they were a whole lot sexier. I had this big belief that, under Kliff Kingsbury, they were going to become this crazy air raid. And it's really been a lot more dinking and dunking than what I expected. It hasn't really translated that college level success they were having over there. It hasn't come to the NFL level, and that can kind of be expected. I still think there's plenty of fantasy juice on this roster because of who's at the top, Kyler Murray. And I always, as we're going to go through these projections, you'll see you start with the team level inputs, and I really like that. There hasn't been any major changes here. So I'm expecting something pretty similar to last year, which was about a 56% pass and 42 or 54, 45 or so percent rush, as you can see there. And that would equate to about 620 pass attempts for 42. So we're looking at the pies first, and then we talk about how we think they're going to be distributed. So do you think I seem like a nutcase for that, Nat, or does that seem pretty reasonable?
No, I don't think you seem like a nutcase. There's plenty of stuff you seem nutty for, but yeah, that makes sense to me. You want me to talk about some of the fantasy relevant, actually all of the fantasy relevant guys for that matter? You want me to?
Yeah, we mind as well.
All right, let's talk Kyler Murray. He's the guy, dripping sex appeal as far as fantasy goes. Your big board, you got Kyler as your QB3, and by projections, you got him as your QB5. So, that's right in the same ballpark. Obviously, you really like the guy. One thing that I noticed, and this isn't just with you, this seems to be on a lot of the lists out there, running quarterbacks, just huge premiums, it seems like. If you can get stuff on the ground, it just makes you so much more valuable. I think you have Murray's stat line at 29 touchdowns, 14 picks, which is good, not great. But, what he's doing with his legs, I'm assuming makes up the difference. I think you have him actually as your second-ranked rushing quarterback on the season behind just Lamar Jackson.
Which makes perfect sense after the year he had last year. Very involved at the stripe. So I have him right now for 8 touchdowns. I believe he hit 10 last year. So I think they're going to try to run him less. That's not the goal. He's even come out and said, I want to preserve myself. I want to run less. But when push comes to shove, this offense has only been dangerous when he's using his legs and is unpredictable. Otherwise, Kliff Kingsbury really hasn't shown a whole ton as a play caller. So, 620 attempts right in the middle of the pack of the NFL, 4,500 yards, 29 TDs to 14 ints is mediocre in terms of passing wise. But I really think that what we call the Konami code, because of how big of an edge it is in fantasy football, the rushing upside is still there with Kyler. I have him ranked as my QB3, just given what he did last year. He was unstoppable until he got a little dinged up in the last quarter of the season or so, and then he really trailed off. But, man, if he could stay healthy all year, these projections are going to potentially be a low ball. I'm just worried because of how small he is and how often he runs.
No, same concerns as a guy who grew up a Michael Vick fan. I've seen it happen before. All right, let's talk running backs. This is like a backfield that I want no part of at all. This is the thing that I hate so much. You still got to rank them. Somebody's still going to draft them. You got your James Conner and Chase Edmonds, two-headed monster, if you could really call it that. I don't know. And what was interesting looking at your rankings is you got these guys pretty much right next to each other on your big board. You got Edmonds at 32. You got Conner at 34. But when you look at projections, you actually have Edmonds 14 spots higher than Conner. You actually have him as your RB24 and Conner as your RB38. You've got him getting a relatively even workload, but Edmonds getting a lot more receiving work. But you've also got Conner finding the end zone on the ground more. Production-wise, you got Edmonds significantly higher on the board, but your gut seems to put him right about even.
Yeah, it's one of those situations that's so tricky to figure out how this is going to shake out. But I think exactly how you described, much higher receiving upside with Edmonds, who's been by far the more efficient backs on a yards per touch basis. I believe he ranked in the top 5 last year. They just never fully seemed ready to hand him any type of full workload. And I don't think they let Drake go, and it seems like maybe they'll let him go. And all the buzz earlier and before the camp started in OTAs was this is just a competition in name. Edmonds is their bell cow for the future. And that just hasn't been the case. Or in early camp, they're saying it's a 1A, 1B situation. They're alternating all the early work. And one crazy stat with Edmonds, and as you said, Connor's significantly projected higher for rushing touchdowns, is Edmonds has only had one career goal line carry his entire career.
All right.
Meanwhile, we've seen Connor serve as a very quality goal line back. For all his faults, he is a bruiser. He breaks through tackles, and I think that's going to carry over. His running back coach from the Steelers is now there with the Cardinals. So that's why you can see I have him projected for more rushing carries, more rushing touchdowns. I think he shoulders more of the ground pie, but Edmonds does his damage much more as a receiver. So 87 targets, pretty high projection for Edmonds, 64 of them being caught for 467 and 5 TDs. That's pretty close to what he did last year, with a little bit of a bump up now that I see him getting some more work with a little more rushing volume. I don't think this is like a James Conner steps right into Kenyon Drake's role, who was top 3 in goal line carries last year. But I just see it more of that. Edmonds has the high receiving upside, could potentially take over as a bell cow. And clearly, my projections say I must be higher on him, and that must be full PPR projections too at the 64. I think he could end up being towards the top in running back receptions among the league. But I just think there's going to always be James Conner, as you can see, eating into the rushing workload, especially at the stripe. And that just kind of carries Edmonds down below my rankings, below some guys I think could really separate as true every down bell cows.
And if you're buying into a backfield, the last phrase you want to hear is running back 1A and running back 1B.
Never.
You do not want to hear that ever.
Never.
All right, let's talk about the receiving core. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins, the guy at the top, as he would be on pretty much any receiving core. Then you got Christian Kirk and the corpse of A.J. Green. And DeAndre Hopkins, you got him ranked 6 and 5 on your projections and big board, respectively. That sounds reasonable to me. Christian Kirk, you got at – now, obviously, the discrepancies and ranking between your lists, the lower down the list, the less it's meaningful. If you're 20 spots apart between 80 and 100 or something, it's not as big a deal as 6 spots apart in the top 10.
Right.
But you do have Christian Kirk projected as your wide receiver 64, and on your big board, you got him down at 80, whereas you got AJ Green at 78 and 89 on your big board. I actually think even down at 89, AJ Green's probably being overvalued.
And I think absolutely.
And Kirk may be undervalued.
Yeah, maybe. And here's the thing, though, and I'm going to actually do a little bit of an update today. This is one of the few things I still have left to update. Rondale Moore looked great in their preseason debut. No, there was no DeAndre Hopkins or AJ Green on the field, so you take that with a grain of salt. But they were force-feeding this guy early on, design screens, moving him into the backfield, and that's exactly what you wanted to see the usage from. So when we talk about Chase Edmonds, I have this high reception total, but another reason I ranked him a little bit lower than my projections was I wouldn't be shocked if Rondale takes a lot of work out as a receiving back in the backfield. He's so explosive with the balls in his hand. So by the end of this next update, I think I'm going to have Rondale Moore moved up all the way to wide receiver 2. And the big discrepancy there is I think we've seen the best of Kirk. There's no real ceiling there anymore. The floor's okay. Yay, he'll have a couple big blow-up games.
Yeah.
But to me, when you have an explosive talent like Rondale Moore there, I think he's going to really eat into that. And it's just going to be kind of that alpha DeAndre Hopkins, as you can see over here. I have him projected for a 26% target share. He was right around 30 last year. I think that's very fair for another 160 or so targets. Should be in the top of the NFL in that category. And then just a really tricky distribution between Edmonds and all the other receivers behind him. There's really none of those 3 guys that I'm going to be going out of my way for, other than Rondale Moore, given how versatile his role could be and how they might force feed him touches.
Somebody's going to draft AJ Green. As I was going through these lists, every couple teams, I'd come to a guy and I would just be like, I want no part of him. Somebody's going to reach for this guy because he had a good season 6 years ago.
Yeah, and DeAndre Hopkins is already raving about this guy. Like, this is going to be the best duo in the league. He still has a step.
Is he talking about AJ Green?
Yeah, he was, and I just don't buy it.
No,
I mean,
man,
you can see
on.
though too.
I like AJ Green too, but no, come on.
Right, exactly. And I guess since this is a projection show, I know our viewers can see everything, but the listeners on the pod, we're going to be dropping this, pretty much every night after we do these shows, if not in the morning the next day. So I want to make sure I just kind of reiterate what those numbers are. So I have DeAndre Hopkins for 161 targets, 113 receptions, 1,446 yards, 7 TDs, which again would bring him to, what did you say was my ranking for him overall, my projections?
For Hopkins?
Yeah.
You got him at 6 on your projections, 5 on your big board.
Yeah, that seems to make perfect sense. Then below him, as Nat was saying, it's just kind of a mess. Kirk for 711 and 4. AJ Green 505 and 4, Rondale Moore 689 and 5. But I think there's going to be some rushing work that comes with Rondale Moore as well. So again, out of all these guys, Rondale definitely the most intriguing behind DeAndre Hopkins. And as we said, the backfield, just 616 in a TD for Edmonds, just one TD, that one goal line carry. 64 receptions, 87 targets is where you're getting your money. And then 656 for James Conner with 8 rushing touchdowns is what I expect, given how much they rush Drake at the goal line. I think that goes much more to Conner than it will Edmonds, plus another 20 catches or so for him. So those are the projections. I'll make sure to do that a little bit cleaner with the other teams, but I just remembered we have
this is the first team out of 32 we're doing, and I haven't been on a pod in a couple months, so we're working it out. I will say we're about out of our 10 minutes for Arizona, which is good because we're not going to even talk about their tight end.
No, it's nothing to bring up. Dan Arnold was there last year. He was irrelevant, but still more relevant. I don't know who is the tight end. Let me scroll down. Max Williams. Oh, good. Yeah, let's worry about him in the 200 yards and a touchdown he's going to have this year.
Big game Max.
Yeah, big game Max, exactly. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.